Hello, I'm Mr. Ethan, and I'm so happy you could join us today. Today we have a really fun activity that I think you're all going to enjoy, and that is we will be making our own Play-Doh. Before we can begin making our own Play-Doh, we'll first want to gather some tools that we're going to need. The first thing we'll need is, of course, a nice mixing bowl to mix all our ingredients in. We will need a few measuring cups to measure out our dry ingredients. I have here a half cup and a third cup. These are fractions of cups. These are measuring cups for dry ingredients. It's a bit different than wet ingredients like water, so we would use these for things like salt and flour and those sorts of things. We have the additional tools of a tablespoon. This is another type of measuring cup, except even smaller than a cup. And we also will need something to stir our ingredients with when we get them into the bowl. You can use a wooden spoon, but I have here a nice bamboo chopstick to use. We will also need a liquid measuring cup to measure out our water. I have one right here. I have already taken the liberty of filling it with a cup of water, which is the amount of water we will need to make our Play-Doh. To make our Play-Doh, we're only going to need 3 simple ingredients that are pretty common kitchen cooking ingredients, actually. And just like with the water, I have went ahead and measured out the ingredients beforehand just to save on mess in the production studio. But we have a cup of water, like I mentioned earlier. We will also need 1 cup of salt. So that's quite a bit of salt. That's more than you'd ever really want to eat. That's way too much. We have a cup of flour and an additional cup of flour. And as you can see, I've also put on a glove already just so my hands don't get messy while I'm making this. And I'm going to put on another glove before I start mixing. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do in order to begin actually making our Play-Doh is we're going to want to put all of our dry ingredients into the bowl. So first, I'm going to take our cup of flour, our first cup, and just pour that into the bowl. Be careful not to drop it, or else you might make a mess. Fortunately, I didn't make a mess this time, but I'll have to be more careful in the future. Then we have our second cup of flour. We're just going to throw that in there as well. And then finally, we're going to add our salt. Just dump that in. And then we take our chopstick and we mix it around a bit to make sure all of our salt and flour is really mixed up nicely and incorporated with each other. The next part is where our tablespoon and our water comes in. So we're going to want to add our water to our dry ingredients, but we're going to use our tablespoon to add it slowly, just a tablespoon at a time. We'll pour it in, and then as we add it, we'll start to mix it up. And at first, it's not going to look like the water's doing a whole lot to the dough, but that's okay because we'll be adding more slowly over time. And this is very important. It is very important to not add your water in all at once and to partial it out and do it slowly. As you're mixing your water into your flour and salt, you're going to begin to notice that some clumps are forming in the dough, but that's all right. It looks like it's not one big ball at the moment, but by the time we're done, it'll all come together. Through the magic of internet television, I have already got all our water mixed in, and our dough is looking something like this. As you can see, it's a pretty big clumpy mess right now, but now comes the fun part. Now we're going to knead our dough and mix it together even more, and we're going to do this for about 10 minutes, so you basically just stick your hand in and you start mixing and mashing and squishing and folding it all together and just having a real good time just playing with it, basically. Finally, when we're done kneading and mixing, we'll be left with this, our finished Play-Doh. Now, it's not quite done yet because we're going to want to set it to the side and let it just sit and rest for about 20 minutes just to make sure it all has come together and is percolated nicely. Now, our finished Play-Doh that's now resting came together nicely. It has a nice texture and it has a nice feel and it's very moldable, but it's also not very interesting to look at, which is why I earlier made some example Play-Doh that shows some of the things you can do with it. One thing you can do to really personalize it and liven it up is to add some food coloring during the kneading process, and that'll allow you to make different colors. Like earlier, I made this one, this pink ball of Play-Doh. I made a blue ball earlier as well, and green, as well as yellow. And these are just some of the ideas for things you can do. You can also make different sculptures or pots or cups or whatever your imagination tells you to out of your Play-Doh. And with an adult's help, you can use an oven set to a very low heat to dry out your Play-Doh so it will hold its shape, and then you'll be able to paint it. One thing to remember, though, is never use an oven without an adult's supervision, and make sure you have help if you're going to dry your Play-Doh. Another thing to remember is, while all the things we use to make this Play-Doh are things commonly used in food, this Play-Doh isn't good to eat. It wouldn't taste very good, and it would upset your stomach. It has a lot of salt, and the flour is raw, and it's not good to eat. You also want to make sure that none of your pets, such as a cat or a dog, gets in this. It's very not good and will make them very sick if they eat any of this. Another thing to remember is this Play-Doh isn't quite like the kind you buy at the store, so you're going to want to store it in the refrigerator to make sure it doesn't get moldy or go bad before you're done playing with it. Before we finish up for the day with our Play-Doh making program, I'd like to showcase a book that we have available for checkout at the Mooresville Public Library. We have awesome clay art. This book is really interesting because it has a lot of different projects you can make using clay, but you can also use your Play-Doh, and if you have an adult's help to dry out your Play-Doh to keep it in whatever you turn it into forever, you can keep these things. It has some fun things like an ocean mobile if you want to make a bunch of little fish to have. It also has dinosaur dish. This could be really fun, a little dish shaped like a dinosaur. That would be a really cool thing to have, I think. Thank you so much for joining us today for our virtual Play-Doh making program. I hope you had as much fun as I did. And if you are interested in the book I showcased or any other books or movies we have at the Mooresville Public Library, I invite you and your family to come down and see what we have.